I take art very seriously, but I don't always want to sound like I do. The summer of 1989, which was the summer after my freshman year at RISD, I was working at a skate shop, and to supplement my very meager income from the skate shop, I was making a lot of homemade t-shirts of different bands and skateboard company logos. I had a friend who wanted to learn how to make stencils, so I looked through the newspaper and found a picture of Andre the Giant and said, "Why don't you make a stencil of this?" And he said, "No way, I don't want to do Andre the Giant, that's stupid." And my response was, "What are you talking about? Andre the Giant's gonna be taking over." The next thing you know, it had started to become this underground phenomenon where people that I didn't even know came up to me and said, "Hey, do you have any of those Andre the Giant stickers?" And it was like a subcultural secret handshake, and I didn't expect that, but I saw a power to it that I was fascinated by. This idea that public space is usually reserved for advertising and government signage, and anything other than that is actually, an anomaly. But it wasn't so much that the sticker was anything special. I think it was the process of dissemination, and then my understanding that placing something in unusual spaces that is memorable has a power. And I decided, well, I've already accidentally stumbled onto something and done some work with it. I should take this and evolve it. Growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, I really didn't have a great knowledge of contemporary art, but I always liked to draw and paint. But when I started skateboarding at age 14 was when I really started to pay attention to art outside of a lot of the quaint stuff I was surrounded by in Charleston. And that was through the album packaging of punk rock done by people like Winston Smith for the Dead Kennedys, Raymond Pettibone for Black Flag, Jamie Reed for the Sex Pistols, and then the skateboard graphics done by people like Jim Phillips for Santa Cruz, Vernon Court Johnson for Powell Peralta, Pusshead for Zorlak. And from there, I started to take a little bit more of an interest in other graphic art and fine art forms, including pop artists like Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, Jasper Johns, Robert Rauschenberg. I really loved the balance between accessible imagery and things that seemed like they could come from editing and appropriation, deciding to juxtapose or configure images in a certain way, but the artist bringing their own thing to it, because that in some ways was analogous to the ransom note style of punk rock and the Xeroxing that went into that. Once I learned how to shoot photo emulsion screens, multiple color things, I could combine my illustration, my photography, collage. It would all be synthesized through the process of screen printing. I think it made me a lot more ambitious, less fearful as an artist. So I started to use a cohesive color palette, and I started to develop a vocabulary of motifs that would be useful to me in reminding people that it's not just the color scheme, but this came from me. This is a Sheparda Faireyho and the Obey campaign because the star icon is in the image, the exclamation point, the arrow, the red rays in the background. As time went by and as my project progressed and evolved, I realized that really there was no point in just pandering to the people that already agreed with me, especially seeing the backlash to Nirvana's success. Even though I came from punk rock, this idea of elitism not just being from the top of the pyramid down, but also there's fringe elitism as well, that started to really emerge for me, and that if I believed in equal opportunity and being a populist, that I couldn't be, an elitist in the margins and say, this isn't for you, square guy, this is only for my cool rebel friends. The best art, I think, makes the world feel a little bit less terrifying. It makes things feel a little more intertwined. And one of the things that I got out of seeing my work resonate with people I wouldn't have expected was this potential to maybe cross-pollinate with a lot of different groups of people and have a dialogue happen that could be beneficial to everyone. I wanted to maintain my punk rock ideals when that made sense, but I also wanted to infiltrate the dominant structure. This idea that a picture can be the thing that hits a viewer in the gut, that makes their head follow their heart, is such an important concept in my work, that no matter what I'm doing, I like the idea that someone can't resist the visual allure of an image, and even if it doesn't align with their political predispositions, that the image itself will be beckoning them to mull it over. When I made the Obama Hope poster, I made it as a tool of grassroots activism along the same lines as any of the posters I make. The posters I made that were against the Iraq War and the Patriot Act, a lot of the things that I thought were dangerous about the Bush presidency. When I saw someone running for president that I thought really typified the antithesis of the Bush views, I thought it made sense for me to support that person. So even though some people considered the Obama poster as a departure from my rebel tendencies, it actually, I thought, was a very logical approach to what was going on at the time in America. A lot of people feel like spectators in democracy. They don't feel like they have the power to make a difference. And I'm so glad that I have the Obama Hope poster as a case study to say that I, with very few resources by political standards, not involved with a corporation, not involved with a political party, was able to do something that seemed to impact a lot of people. And I think the more people that participate in democracy, the better it works. A lot of my work is about the symbols of Americana, the symbol of success, and the duality of a lot of those things, that what might be seen as a positive symbol in one realm actually has a dark side that should be viewed with a degree of caution. The iconography of America is something that I like to celebrate visually, but it's also, I think, very ripe for symbolic critique. These ideas of whose power, whose glory, someone's power and glory might be someone else's suffering and degradation, something that's about ego in the moment and not about how this is going to endure. This juxtaposition of the beauty and the thing that might have harmful consequences to that beauty in the same picture, so that relationship has to be addressed, is what I'm doing with those pieces. I'm making work that I think may or may not inspire someone to reconsider their position on something, but if I don't put it out there in public, I think it has less likelihood that it will make a difference. The impact of stumbling upon a mural or an illegal poster or a stencil, there's a little bit of that energy of the act of defiance, or the act of execution on a large scale, the ambition, that I think transfers to the viewer in a way that's different from the experience on the internet or in an institution. I have to be an optimist that every action makes a difference. And public art, I do think, impacts people sometimes very profoundly. And sometimes it's it's a hostile response. But anything that stirs the debate, I think has value. I think the role of my favorite artists in society has been to give people things to dream about and reflect upon, so to escape and to engage simultaneously, bring pleasure and provocation potentially simultaneously. It's when you have a clear head right before you go to bed and you're open to reflecting upon things honestly. That's the moment when we need to all have some art to be able to think about. Everyone knows how they feel when they experience great art, whether it's music or writing or visual art, that it transcends the petty side of humanity. There's something great about it, and I think that the more of that, the better. The less that's about producing widgets on the assembly line monotonously, without any space to dream, and the more dreams that can be fulfilled. You know, that's where artists really fit in, I think.